Hello and welcome to another episode of The Weekend with Candor Beach. Today we've got for you the launch of the crypto ETF last week, the world preparing for a potential global crisis, and Hollywood struggles with breaking into India. So let's kick things off with the world preparing for war. Most recently, we've heard from Sweden that now that they've applied to be a NATO state, they are advising their citizens to prepare themselves for a potential conflict. What are your thoughts on that?
So this is basically another, it's going to be another warning shot from Russia because they're getting closer to Russia. NATO, it was always this way, right? Russia warned NATO, don't come close to Russia and start, like when Ukraine tried to enter the NATO, there was a warning from Russia, don't include Ukraine into NATO because it'll be very close to Kaliningrad. So, and NATO was very adamant that resulted in Russia taking over Ukraine, the military operation which started. This is another powder keg, just the same way. They're doing it over and over again. So,
It's strange, isn't it?
they,
Like it's strange. Like when the Cold War seeded, the conversation was like when NATO was formed as well. The conversation was, we're fine with the formation of NATO so long as you leave some gap. Like don't come too close to Russia. Russia was looking
yeah.
at its own personal defense and sovereignty. By attacking Ukraine, you could argue that it is a warning shot, that you are trying to say that like if you violate treaties formed what 3 decades ago, treaties with us, you are going to there are going to be consequences. I think that's what Russia originally tried to say. But then when you're conquering Ukraine, aren't you voluntarily going closer to the NATO states?
Sure. If you look back, Russia actually asked NATO to join NATO
Yeah.
long back,
Yeah.
and NATO denied Russia. There is a huge difference from the USSR, the Soviet Union Russia, to the present day Russia. But America still sees the present day Russia as the Soviet Union, very bad, enemy,
Cold War
but the thing
hangover,
is,
right?
yeah, they still have that hangover. But at the end of the day, most of European energy is supplied by Russia. So if they didn't have this perspective, they shouldn't have been dependent on Russia. Like most of the energy is coming from Russia. Like that's why energy prices shot up. Like they had to go through that brutal winter without cheap Russian energy. So there is a lot of Europe is in a dilemma. Like Europe messed up. I think Trump was right. Trump went and told Germans to their face that you're way too dependent on Russia, and you want us to protect you from Russia, but you're giving all your money to Russia for your energy.
Yeah,
There
so
that is
from a military perspective
that
though,
is
like
dichotomy.
if we
Yeah.
could keep the conversation to the military perspective, because that's pertinent to what we're going to continue discussing. Sweden said this: their citizens are now gearing up. They are considering bringing back a draft of sorts.
Mm.
They're also looking at having citizens serve, like with countries in like South Korea or Singapore, where you have mandatory service, mandatory civil service. Is that what it's called? Military
Mm.
service,
Mm.
something to the tune of that. That's what Sweden is looking into getting into. What are your thoughts on the world looking into compulsory military service eventually?
Yeah, so if you look at it, like it's going to happen. It's bound to happen, right? So compulsory military service is going to happen all over the world because first, look at America. We have uh, the biggest. They couldn't, hire more people into the military this year. They fell short, huge numbers. Like army fell short to sign up a lot of these military into so there are issues. So that's going to happen all over the world because people are going to be scared to join military right before war, right? So if you look at it, there's these small wars which are happening all over the world. Yeah, the everything
Iran,
started with the Russia,
Pakistan,
Ukraine. Yeah, the Pakistan, then the
most lately.
Houthis. Yeah, the Houthis, and then the Israel, Hamas, Israel, Hezbollah. All these are popping up everywhere.
Israel, Iran as
So
well. Like most recently, apparently
yeah,
Israel fired a
Israel,
rocket
Iran.
into Syria again and killed Irani
Yep.
military.
So and with all that happening, you have all these ships rerouting away from Red Sea, going around Africa through Cape of Good Hope. All this,
So
everything adds up.
the
So
thing with the Iranians right now is that because they also support the Houthis, they're randomly making incursions into Pakistan. Not incursions per se, but shooting into Pakistan. They support the Houthis, who are terrorizing the Red Sea basin of sorts. Um, the UK and the US have entered into a conflict to protect uh, vessels that are going through the Red Sea.
hmm
People are diverting traffic, diverting ships, like you mentioned, across the Good Hope.
yeah,
Now, this is affecting China as well, and China has strong ties with Tehran.
Tehran,
And
yeah.
yeah, and there is this potential where China comes in and voices their opinion about, because it's affecting trade for them as well, right? Like now, energy shipment is coming around across the Cape of Good Hope. Like at the end of the day, it's getting more expensive. It's taking longer. That can't be good for China
Yeah,
either.
China is getting affected. Another thing is, um, Iran and Pakistan are Chinese allies, right? So if they both start fighting, it's bad for China regardless. So, but if you look at the Iran and the Pakistan thing, Pakistan always been an American ally for the longest time. So all these, like this is being like more fuel is being thrown into this, because Pakistan is American ally and Iran is, Russian ally. It's basically, America versus Russia all over the world again, in little conflicts.
America versus China is a strong conversation that's been building up over the last decade, I would
Yeah,
say. Like China holds a lot of U.S. debt, so the U.S. always has to be mindful of that fact that that China could flood the market whenever they feel like. India is diversifying. We are getting out of the dollar dependency, right? I think we had a podcast about de-dollarization a while back,
yeah,
and that is still going strong. The first Bitcoin ETF has dropped, and let's switch topics to that. The first Bitcoin ETF dropped on the 11th of January, if I remember correctly, the 10th, 11th of January,
yeah.
that week. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what is the implication on the world with that?
So this, like, if you look at it, the analysts, a lot of these analysts are saying that this particular Bitcoin ETF will bring
Hmm.
in close to like 50 billion to 100 billion this year alone. So, and like if you look at the entire Bitcoin market capitalization, it stood at around staggering $913 billion. So it's almost close to $1 trillion. So just with this ETF, with all these big players coming in like BlackRock, there is, these players coming in, putting in their bets. This could be like a huge watershed moment for Bitcoin itself, making it mainstream. It's like
So Bitcoin went
including it
from.
in an asset class.
So help me out with this. Bitcoin was at 45K before the ETF dropped. It's at 41K now.
Yeah, that's normal volatility, but that is going to sustain regardless. Like
Is
this
there
will increase a lot of volatility for Bitcoin itself.
There are crypto sites that are citing that there is an increased position in. Well, I shouldn't say increased position. Like they say that there are increased buyers of calls at a strike price of 45,000, 46,000, which implies that there are people who are bullish about the stock going up over 45, 46, the price of
Yeah.
Bitcoin going up over 45, 46,000 dollars. So hopefully, crypto
It's
back to the moon.
remember Bitcoin touched 66,000 and came back
Close to
down to
70.
like
Yeah.
20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's this is the year 2024 is where the Bitcoin block is gonna half again.
Yeah. April
So
sometime. Yeah.
yeah, so if that happens, it goes from 6.25 to 3.75 Bitcoins per block. So
Mm-hmm.
that will increase the push of the price. It will take it to, like, hopefully it's going to touch 100,000. So it's basically an asset class now since the ETF is already launched.
Final couple of thoughts on this. I would say one, we still haven't found a use for Bitcoin just yet. Like theoretically, we are talking about value storage as a safe haven
Mhm.
against the dollar, but now countries countries are looking at de-dollarization already. Countries are looking at diversifying their portfolio in terms of with respect to currencies. Countries like India are talking to other countries to ensure better convertibility. Like India, the rupee is not freely convertible, which is why you don't have a lot of countries using the Indian rupee, which was why Russia was talking about importing uh, like payment of oil that India was buying
Yeah.
through the yuan. So India is in
Yep. Yep.
conversation with other countries to ensure that India is easier to convert. Now the rupee is easier to convert, not India is easier to convert. Blah. Now, we are looking at moving away from the dollar. The Bitcoin was supposed to help us hedge against the dollar hegemony. So, how do you think that's going to impact the whole Bitcoin conversation? Like, we don't have a use for Bitcoin, right? That was what I think Berkshire
Mm,
Hathaway's position was as well.
Yeah.
Warren
It's
Buffett's
more of an
position.
asset class like gold or like silver, where
But
you can it
gold has its use. Gold's used in every electronic
sure.
device, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
beyond jewelry.
yeah, beyond.
What do you
Yeah,
use
like
Bitcoin
Bitcoin
for?
is not um used to be a transactional thing, but not a big deal anymore. Like it's more in India they converted it to more of a commodity to an asset, right? So similar to that, but there is no underlying there is no use for it. Like it still has to form something. Like
Which is the problem? Yeah.
my prediction with this is Bitcoin will become an interbank exchange currency. So more like,
Why?
if um I because it's stable. After most of it is mined, about 98%. Once the mining is done, if you can peg certain currencies, like look at uh, we have
Like,
El
here's an
Salvador,
argument
right?
against
So
it.
which pegged
So,
its pegged its currency to Bitcoin, like a Bitcoin standard. Something like, instead of gold standard, something like Bitcoin standard.
so here's an argument against it. With gold, you are dependent upon a resource that is naturally occurring. Now, moving away from the argument that gold technically came to our planet on asteroids and whatnot, like gold isn't native to the
Mm-hmm.
Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so gold's been distributed, gold's been sought after for centuries now. The Bitcoin is a man-made device of sorts and is currently being controlled by certain pockets. BlackRock has what, 700 million in assets in Bitcoin, but typically BlackRock has like billions of dollars to deploy. So 700 million is more of a hedge than an actual bet on the asset, in my opinion. Um, India
Yeah,
is
but
India hasn't gone in for crypto. El Salvador has. The U.S. government, now that they've allowed for this ETF to come in, but again, like, consider the fact that the U.S. is very capitalistic. China, Russia, there are conversations about crypto mining, but those have moved away because of the energy expenses involved with crypto mining. So I don't necessarily see enough countries participating for it to become a standard where you're pegging things to Bitcoin. It's a possibility, but I don't know how likely that's going to be. Not a high probability is
Yeah,
what I'm arguing.
the reason why I said it, because you cannot randomly increase the number of bitcoins are there. So
Finite.
not any country can. Yeah, there are finite number. You want to go to war, you can just start printing. Like America starts printing dollars, right? Whenever it wants money, it starts printing. So that is one of the biggest resource. So that's why it holds the value it is. Like
Yeah,
it's
but
not
if
going
you
to fall.
accumulate more Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and because your currency is pegged against it, like we really have to move on. But if your currency is pegged to it and you're accumulating more Bitcoin, your currency automatically increases in value. So people with
Sure.
money
Yeah.
to mobilize right now will go about hoarding it the moment the world decides that this is what's going to happen, which is going to
I
be
agree.
unfair to
There
smaller
are
countries.
problems to it. Yeah, there are problems to it. So that's something we
Moving
should
on though.
work on. So,
Moving
yeah.
on though, Hollywood struggled to crack into India. So recently we've talked about Z and Sony's potential merger, and Sony's
Hmm.
talking about ousting Goenka, who potentially engineered this deal. So there was this U.S. Asset management company, I believe, like if I've read that correctly, that were looking at getting rid of Goenka and Chandra because
Invesco.
Invesco. They were looking at
Yeah.
getting rid of Chandra and Goenka because apparently they were diverting funds about 2 billion rupees. They diverted out of Z, and they were looking at bringing in. And that was their general direction. But then Goenka engineered this deal with Sony, and 2 years hence, nothing's moved. The Indian regulatory body has approved of the merger, but they haven't been able to consummate this because, again, Goenka's they're like Sony's looking at ousting
No
Goenka,
walking
and
in.
and Sony's not and Sony's not budging from that position, and Goenka's like, I don't want to leave. I'm perfectly happy where I am. Thank you very much. So Z's stock has tanked. Z's not been doing very well because it's a very competitive market, right? India has the volume, but India does not necessarily have the buying power, at least not the willingness to pay, which is why
Hmm.
streaming giants around the world that are working in India are not getting the same amount of money, the same amount of value per customer as they are in North America. So, what are your thoughts
Yep.
here? Is Hollywood going to
Yeah. It's
continue to struggle? Why are they struggling in India?
it happened. It's happening with Walt Disney trying to exit out of the Indian market. So they invested heavy. They came in,
A partial
guns
exit, right? It's not a
blazing.
complete exit.
Yeah, so they want to. I mean, it's still basically accepting defeat, right? So it happened in other industries too. Like if you look at the auto industry, you have the Ford, the Chevrolet
Well,
trying to go
Ford's looking at coming back. Ford's reversing
until
its.
it comes back. I don't know.
No,
That's
so
just
Ford was looking at exiting, but then more recently they decided against it, and they're going to stick to like making a comeback into India. But here's the thing: like with Disney and with Auto, I'm treating Disney as a separate entity because Bob Iger's decisions have been very interesting of late. Um, Auto, there is this confusion about whether they need to go gung ho on EV or whether they need to look at an alternative. Toyota, one of the world's biggest manufacturers, is looking at is calling EV out.
yeah.
You've been anti EV for from day one. Toyota is like hybrids make sense. EVs, there are lots of issues. We won't go into that right now. Not the time to go into it. Bob Iger, the problem with Disney is they've mired themselves into the whole DEI conversation. And there are instances where it's not playing out in their favor, like with Snow White and the 7 diversity hires did not work out. They decided to push the release of Snow White by a year and then fix that. I'm sorry, but then they were looking at Star Wars, rebranding Star Wars. They brought in uh, this lady
Yeah, they
who's only
messed up on
made
that, man.
they've only made this lady Charmaine Obey Chinoy, I think is her name. Chinoy. I might be butchering the name, but she's known for documentaries. She's being brought in to take up to helm the Star Wars project, But
Yeah.
because people weren't very happy with the idea of someone who does not look like a Star Wars fan coming in and actively influencing that conversation, like she's made comments, again, this is out of context, please gather full context before forming your opinion of this lady, but she's made conversations like, or points like, she wants to make men uncomfortable. Now when you have a Star Wars fan base that is predominantly male, and there is a strong influence which is driving away from what is tried, tested, and true, what people love about Star Wars. Now, I don't know what her vision is, so I'm not trashing her vision, but it's just like it's not the best signal to the market. It's a little scary. And now apparently Charmin, this director, has gone up to Disney and said that she needs to be paid more because what they're paying her, like bringing her onto the Star Wars franchise, wasn't enough. She wants to be paid more, like 3x or something of that sort. But her salary was revised instead, like revised down to accommodate for the star of Star Wars, Daisy Ridley, I believe is her name, to accommodate for a salary hike for her to do the new project. So she's like, and justifiably so. Like if I were in her place, I would also be upset. Like, why are you cutting down my salary for somebody else's? Like, just find more money. But Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy have like moved forward, and like Kathleen Kennedy has been responsible for the Star Wars project for the last 10 years. They have moved away from the tried and true. They're trying to get rid of the original, like what has made Star Wars great, like the Luke Skywalker and etc. etc. I hate the use of the word etc., but I'm going to use it because I'm trying to speed through this conversation. They've moved away from what is tested and true, what is loved about the franchisee. They're moving into a new direction, but they're like, I feel like they're shooting themselves in the foot. If you're backing a director, back her 100%. Don't like send mixed signals where you're like, okay, we'll fire you from these other projects and we'll take down your total pay because we suddenly don't think you're worth it. Or I don't know what they're trying to say. And like they're bringing in a director that's only made documentaries to direct one of the biggest franchises to have ever been created, and the sequels were not well received. Episodes 7, 8, 9 were not as, people weren't thrilled about those episodes. You have to go in and take a hard look at yourself. Snow White not doing very well. Like this whole live action rehash has not been going very well for Disney. I feel like the entertainment industry is in flux to an extent. Now, this is the entertainment industry that we live in currently, and they are trying to enter India. They are trying to make a strong push for India. So go.
Yeah.
I said a lot.
See if you look at the when you bring up, I just hope they don't mess up the Star Wars thing too, because they messed up the Snow White. The lead actress came and said, who actually said
Rachel
Snow
Ziegler.
White is white? Yeah, and it says in the story,
the description
right?
of the Grimms, yeah.
Yeah, so that is the biggest problem. They're bringing all this extremely diversity into it, and they're changing the story where
They're forcing
people already
diversity.
know the story.
They're not starting
They're
a
forcing
conversation.
diversity into things.
You start a conversation around diversity, that's fantastic. You force diversity into an existing beloved franchise or conversation, it's just like you're trying to make people accept a worldview
Black
that they're
Panther,
not.
right? When Black Panther came in,
Beautiful
they
movie.
brought in. It was fantastic. They brought in this new, the full black cast. That's fine, but it's a whole new story written all around this. That's the perfect way to do it. But
Yep.
don't take something which is already existing and try to add diversity to it. So and the thing is, diversity doesn't fly in India. In India, they see
That's not
through
true.
this. So
That's not true.
DEI thing, it doesn't really work in India. I'm not sure. But I understand India is diverse itself, but I'm talking about if you're trying to bring this like they had this He's Pregnant or whatever in Netflix. Remember, that was a big there was a TV show which got canceled because nobody really wanted to watch it. Like like that. Like, they struggled, they reversed course. Netflix struggled, they reversed course, and now they're actually picking up back in Steam. So that is what I'm saying. People rejected their content, and Disney's also struggling the same way. I hope they change course. If they change course and bring in
So
good
here's
content.
the issue that I think that's prevalent in India. You have brands that look at market potential in terms of volume. They're like, oh wow, so many people. We're definitely going to earn money out of this. The problem is with India, at least, the conversation is going to be around longevity. If you can outlast everybody else in the market, you're going to succeed because you have sort of established a pseudo monopoly, which is what RIL is doing, which is what Reliance is doing, right? Like they're
Yep,
offering
yep,
things for
yep.
free, they're burning through cash, but they're building on market share. At the end of the day, that's what counts, because when I'm increasing prices with inflation, with whatever, when people are more willing to pay for their subscriptions, um, they will have to hike prices and they'll become profitable. They'll make up for these lost years. It's like a capital budgeting thing, which I think your shareholders abroad, like in NASDAQ, they're not necessarily going to accept, because at this point in time, I want to see growth. Everywhere else, you've seen subscription hikes. Why aren't you enforcing it in this market, this huge
Yep.
market? I think that's the problem, shareholder pressure.
So
And
I think
content in general is
what
just shit.
yeah. With that, what are our minor topics? Do we have any minor topics to talk about?
We don't have a lot of time to talk about them, but let's breeze through them.
Yeah, so
India's got a growth
go
story
ahead.
through taxes. In 23-24, the estimates are like this financial year, the estimates are 33.61 lakh crores, which is 10.4% higher than the revised estimates from 22-23. Like to put it into context,
Hmm.
22-23, the estimates were 27.58 lakhs, but the net collected was 30.54 lakh crores.
Wow.
27.58 lakh crores. We collected 30.54. We're looking at collecting 33.61 lakh crores this year, with the ICRA pegging the next financial year's collections to be at about 38 lakh crores, which is a 13% increment.
So we have this new mask which is coming in, right? It's still in Kickstarter. It's called SkyTed.
Yeah.
It's basically it brings privacy. Or let's say you wear this mask, you can have a fully private conversation. Nobody even sitting next to you can hear it. Um, it can be a very good like use case is gamers, like gamers trying to play at night and going through this foul mouthing. Nobody sleeping next to them can hear this stuff, so they can go full on gaming without
Wait,
waking
like
somebody
I'm
up
not going
next
to
to them.
pay. So the product's supposed to be on Kickstarter. The product's $299, right? I
Hmm.
don't see myself paying that much for a product that I
Um,
don't really need. But again, considering the fact that I have space, but that's
hmm.
not true in every place, right? Like
That
in
that is
Bombay or
one of the
someplace like
use
that.
cases. So one of the
Military,
use cases you
military
can
is
the
what you'd also
military
talked about.
purposes. Yeah, so if you're talking about military, let's say you're ordering an airstrike on on a location, on a target, and you don't want those coordinates being disclosed, somebody hearing it, you can have that mask on and have a private conversation with your platoon sergeant, or whoever is bombing the location. Or or you're in even in corporate world, right? It helps, like let's say you don't want this
It's too
heavy
expensive. I get what you're saying, but it's
yeah.
too expensive. Like the military, I know will be able to afford it. I get that. 100% makes sense. Gaming, I think it'll be quite expensive for a lot of gamers, because you have to understand that while gaming is massive, you have a certain budget ascribed to it, particularly considering that the younger populace is playing more than the people who have more disposable income. So they're not going to, like, people aren't going to shell $400 $500 for this. On Kickstarter it's $299. Regular prices they cite $500. So I'm a little skeptical. All right, moving on to the third piece.
Third one. So I think India's catching up. Like this is the India is doing the GPS based toll system by like they're waiting on the rollout, pan India rollout for by March 2024. They did a pilot project.
Yeah.
So, but they're doing this uh, money. I think launch. They'll have a GPS system in the car, and whenever you on the freeway, it can actually start charging you.
All right,
So
just in case there
that's
was
the.
like for me, you were breaking up, so I'm just going to repeat what you were saying.
Mhm.
India is introducing a GPS-based toll system. There are conversations about GPS versus what was the other thing called? The one with the cameras reading license plates?
Yeah, ANAR, or I think it's like that's what America has.
Okay,
So it's called the Automatic Number Plate Recognition System, ANPR.
okay. So
The
those are the
Easy Pass in
alternatives that are
America.
being, so those are the alternatives being explored right now. I personally think like since Sri Lanka has got the GPS thing sorted, I believe. Like I visited Sri Lanka in
Mm,
2018, 2019, and that's what I saw. So I think that would make more sense because that's just requires less intervention potentially, but we'll have to see.
yeah,
Cool. That was our rather hurried through piece because we had a lot to say about the topics. Thank you so much
yeah. I think
for yeah, thank you so much for watching this piece, and please let us know what you think. Please let us know what your opinions are on the primary pieces that we discussed. The world preparing for war, Hollywood struggles to get into India. Why do you think Hollywood's struggling? Or the crypto ETF? Like, what are we going to use crypto for? We'd love to hear from you.
definitely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye. See you on the next one.